The following segment on KROC AM is sponsored and paid for by Meshbesher and Spence.
And the one and only Zach Bauer joins us this morning from Meshbesher and Spence. Zach, good to see you again.
Good morning, guys.
Speeding tickets.
Yeah.
That's the topic of the day.
It is the topic of the day.
All right.
What about even 1 mile per hour over?
I think you're probably safe
No
there.
commentary.
I think you're probably safe there.
Okay.
There is even in a, it's pretty rare you're going to get pulled over for something like that. I mean, just a mile or two over the speed limit because there's such a leeway in those radar guns.
Yeah.
Or is it improving?
There's probably, the radars are pretty accurate, but for the most part, I think law enforcement's not, they're not going to spend their time. They have a lot more other things on their minds other than people that are 1 or 2 miles over the speed limit. Now,
okay.
Having said that,
a person that's 1 or 2 miles over the speed limit and driving at 12:30 in the morning when it's bar close time, they might get pulled over for something like that.
Just on the odd chance that there might be something else.
There might be something else going on, right?
Yeah. Well, yeah, you've got to you got to be smart. That's for sure.
You have to be smart, and I think one of the important things that I want to talk about today is just that people that have some habitual speeding issues. I remember well back in the day, before marriage, before things like that.
That's what I'm saying. Back when I lived in the city.
Right. You would pick up a couple speeding tickets, and there was always the idea of, what happens if I get like a third in a year or a fourth in a year, or what happens to me? And in Minnesota, if you pick up 4 speeding violations within 1 year, you lose your license for 30 days.
Smokes.
If you pick up 5 in a period of 24 months, you also lose your license for 30 days. And those are kind of the standard low levels, and the more you get them within a period of 24 months, that can rack it up to 90 days and 180 days and a year. So one of the things that people oftentimes look for an attorney if they are in that habitual speeding situation is trying to prevent that speeding ticket from going on the record.
Sure.
And one of the methods we use sometimes when a person gets to a second or third offense where they're looking at a potential license revocation is trying to do what's called a stay of adjudication with the prosecutor, which would allow that person to plead guilty to the speeding ticket but prevent it from being reported to the Department of Public Safety on some conditions, usually that they don't have any future speeding tickets within 6, 12, 24 months, where it would be the case. Allows them to keep their license in the meantime, but kind of hangs that axe over their head that if they continue to speed, they're going to end up with a license revocation.
How many, I'm just sitting here trying to think when the last time I got a speeding ticket. How long does that hang on your record for your insurance purposes and all that?
Usually for insurance purposes, it'll be between 7 and 10 years, depending on who your insurance company is. A lot of insurance companies look at things like how many miles over the speed limit a person is traveling and how they rate that speeding ticket to some degree. In Minnesota, actually not just Minnesota, in the United States, if you are traveling on a 4-lane divided highway and you get a speeding ticket that's 10 miles or less, that actually is not something that the insurance company will hold against you.
Which is why everybody drives 9 miles per hour over the speed limit.
Yeah, there's that myth of I won't get pulled over.
That makes me. I'm fairly confident at 5 or less over the speed limit on a highway.
That's funny.
But anything more than that, if I see some lights. And I immediately am checking that speedometer, and my thermometer.
Right.
But anyway, I don't think I would.
It seems like
that.
Highway 52 North, where it's 65 miles per hour. There's a lot of people going past me at about 74 miles per hour.
Yeah,
it just seems.
Same. Look at 63 south of here, between here and Stewartville. I mean, that's a speedway.
Highway 14 West, I've also found to be quite a speedway. So it does. There is something to that, isn't there?
Yeah, there's something to the fact that if you're traveling kind of with the flow of traffic, so to speak, that's not a defense. But maybe you're able to kind of dodge the process, so to speak, with
blend in.
Yeah, blend in. But the reality is this. For the most part, speedings can happen either through radar guns or through an officer pacing you. The reality is this: as long as the officers calibrated the radar, really difficult to beat the radar.
Are speed traps common anymore, or is it just mostly...
We don't see those very often. I did have a person that I work with over in law enforcement on occasion, and he had indicated they had a speed trap up near Minneapolis maybe about a couple months ago where they were actually doing the airplane, doing the radaring. But those are, I remember those back when I was growing up in Iowa a lot, but we don't see those down here too often.
I remember mainly in the summertime, but when I lived in South Dakota, going on I-80 or 90 across, what is it?
Yeah,
that
90.
interstate, across the state, and they would have speed traps, and also an I-80 in Nebraska. But, I pulled over once, and I was in a line of about 8 cars, and the
All
guy,
of you?
they weren't given...
Did all of you get pulled over? Because I've
Yes.
seen that before, too.
Yeah, I mean, they were just waving everybody over,
Yep.
and then he just came by, said we had you going, the speed limit at that time was still 55, and I was going like 63 or something. We had to go in 63. He didn't give any tickets, but he was just saying, we're watching.
Yeah.
And he did give some people some tickets because they zoomed past me, and I was kind of feeling pretty cocky at that
Wow.
point. But
There's people that pass me.
but yeah, they had the plane up and they had the radar going, and this
Right.
was like maybe 15, 20 years ago. But
Yeah.
but I don't see that anymore.
Yeah, I've not dealt with, in all my time in practice, I've not dealt one single time with any type of radar from an airplane down here. So I don't think
Are
this
there
happens too often.
folks that fight that ticket?
Yeah, I think a
Just
lot
out
of people.
stubbornness.
I think a lot of people fight those tickets for different reasons. Sometimes there are legit. I mean, there's kind of two different filters. The first filter is the officer. You get pulled over by an officer, and there may be a reasonable explanation of, I'm trying to get somewhere, or there's
Right.
an emergency going on. The first filter is usually the officer. He takes into consideration what you have to say to him about the reason. Maybe he doesn't write you a ticket or gives you a warning, or would be the case. The second filter is the prosecutor, who gets an opportunity to kind of relive that story typically that the officer heard, and sometimes they will give you a break when it comes to dropping it from a 63 and a 55 to a 60 and a 55, and maybe playing with that fine and dropping the fine. But a majority of the time, if it gets to the point where you're actually trying that case and actually trying to prove that you weren't speeding, that's a very difficult chore.
Your attitude does make a difference in a ticket or a warning.
Yeah, I mean, I personally think that, contrary to what I've sometimes talked about with people, of remembering that they have the right to remain silent and things like that, I think sometimes with law enforcement just saying, hey, I was going too fast. I'm sorry, and, this is my reason why, and not playing the game of, I thought I was going 50 when I was really going 75. Right.
A better solution is to just slow down.
Yeah, that's probably the best one.
Probably the best.
They don't like it when you say, I pay your salary.
Oh, gosh.
I would definitely refrain from that.
Anyway, yeah, good idea just to keep... one other question I have.
Yeah.
Is the speed limit take effect when you see the sign or when you're at the sign?
When you get to the sign.
Okay, so technically if you're driving out of a 50, and I'm thinking of going east or west on 14 out of, say, the Barlow Plaza area, and you're at 50... And then 65 is coming up there, and you can see the sign, and you start speeding up. But
Nope.
That's too soon.
65 when you hit the sign.
And you hit the sign.
All right.
All right. Zach, thanks for coming. If somebody wants to get a hold of you at Meshbesher and Spence, what's the best way to do that?
They can contact us at 507-280-8090, or they can visit us online at www.meshbesher.com.
Excellent. We'll talk to you next week.
See you guys.